There are a lot of ways things can go wrong with fuel and combustion systems, but still, in the back of your mind, you may be thinking, that won't ever happen to me. Even with the best possible people, policies, and equipment, accidents can and do happen, and some events are simply out of your control. Depending on your location, your facility could be at risk from floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, and hurricanes. Regardless of whether we're talking about human-made or natural disasters, your facility needs a plan in place to deal with emergencies specific to fuel systems and combustion equipment. There are a number of factors related to fuel systems and combustion equipment that should be considered when it comes to business contingency planning. In a simplistic sense, they would include loss of the main fuel supply, loss of boilers or a main steam header, and loss of furnace or oven capacity. But there are other more subtle related events that can be expensive and dangerous lessons when it comes to fuel and combustion system contingency planning. Following is a list of such considerations. 1. Losing the natural gas system supply. In the case of fuel systems, natural gas can become unavailable through an economic or physical anomaly. There was a period in the 1970s and 1980s when people frequently spoke of firm and interruptible gas. The utility could have called you and said that suddenly the gas you were buying was going to cost a lot more, or they could have decided that there was not enough supply available, so they were shutting you off or curtailing you. It's rare to hear of these types of supplier-related disruptions these days, but in some parts of the United States, depending on the supply piping infrastructure, curtailments do still occur. In most cases, you can buy your way out of a curtailment or at least get some time to plan around it. Also, it is often not a 100% shutoff of gas, but a request for a reduced consumption. You should make sure that you understand your site's gas contract if you have one. The greater risk is from an unexpected physical disruption, such as not having the gas available because of a piping, control, or even a sabotage issue. That's right, sabotage, tampering, and even terrorism are things that we now need to have somewhere in the backs of our minds when it comes to fuel supplies, and this course will provide some thoughts on that as well. There have been numerous cases of main utility valves being mysteriously closed and not corrected for hours, causing lots of damage and disruption. This is why there has been discussion about protection at your main service entrance with fencing and locked gates. Losing the entire gas supply main because of underground piping leaks can be a terrible thing in cold climates if the facility needs to be down for repairs and is vulnerable to freeze damage. There are sites that experience leaks in underground mains. Once this type of leak is identified, a utility will want to shut down the entire system immediately to protect them from liability. In previous courses in the series, we have discussed corrosion protection, that is, having a system and maintaining it. There are other things that can help, such as having dual feeds and networking the gas piping so that it's a loop and not a single line. It's also possible to consider alternative fuels, such as backup propane air supply or even fuel oil. Propane air mix systems have come a long way. They can make a mixture of propane and air available for injection into a fuel header that simulates natural gas in BTU value and function. Losing gas service can also be caused by main incoming regulator failures. Some sites have installed parallel regulator stations to mitigate this risk. These systems remain closed off, but ready to be moved into service simply by changing a couple of valve positions. 2. Losing boilers. This is where sparing philosophy comes into play. Sparing can mean complete 100% redundancy or something less like 66%, such as 2 pieces of equipment each capable of 2/3 of the total expected peak load. It's all a risk-based capital cost exercise to determine how many boilers of what size you should have. You should at least have a conscious awareness of the spare capacity that exists. Spare capacity and sparing philosophy should be evaluated and policy-driven and not be something that just happened by accident. Now is a good time to see what the original design was at some sites versus what you now have. What's the right sparing philosophy for business conditions today? Have loads grown through the years so that now you actually are not spared according to the philosophy that once existed? What about critical auxiliaries such as feedwater pumps and tanks? Are they spared? Do they need to be? An obscure part of boiler systems that is not given adequate attention is feedwater tanks. It is rare to find that these have been internally inspected and have had NDT testing done on a regular basis. There have been catastrophic failures of these that have made for tremendous damage and loss of life, since in some cases they hold large quantities of saturated water. An opening of the feedwater tank pressure vessel, even if it is at 10 psig pressure, can make for a tremendous explosion. Besides the explosion risk, the lead time to get a feedwater tank can be 12 to 18 weeks. This can be very disruptive. The NBBI, www.nationalboard.org, can provide guidance on appropriate feedwater tank testing and NDT procedures to minimize risks. Many sites install rental boiler connections ahead of time to prevent downtime in case they have to bring a unit onto the site. There is a huge boiler rental industry with at least 6 major nationwide players. Do yourself a favor and call 1 or 2 in to speak about this subject before you need them. They can probably do a walkthrough review of your facility at no charge and point out some things that can be done to make a rental boiler installation happen faster if this ever becomes a need. If you do ever engage them, be very careful about charges for things such as damage to their equipment. Make sure that there is a thorough investigation and documentation of the inside of the boilers ahead of time so that you don't get blamed for things like poor water treatment during the rental period. Rental vendors will tell you that they can have a boiler to you quickly, perhaps within hours. They do not tell you that you will have to provide connections for the steam, electrical, water, and so on. This can take days under the best of circumstances. Map out a place where boilers might sit, locate the utility tie-ins, and install additional valves if necessary to accommodate tie-ins. This is another matter that you need to consider in advance if the nature of your product or processes is critical. 3. Losing a furnace or oven. In the case of furnaces or ovens, there are often no good alternatives if a catastrophic outage occurs. In some cases, spare fuel trains and burners can be lined up in advance. However, in most cases, if a furnace or oven is damaged so that operation cannot occur, there is no simple backup plan other than finding another facility with capacity. Again, this needs to be a sparing philosophy determination. How many ovens or furnaces should you have?